Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Before coming here, I was in Connecticut, and the devotees arranging the programs in Connecticut asked me to speak on a topic that could be easily understandable by newer people. So the topic was compassion. There are 3 parts, and I've not decided yet what's going to happen Saturday. 2 parts, but this is part 1, exercising compassion in contemporary life. That compassion is a quality, a natural quality that's there in a soul that is at least moving towards higher modes of nature, towards goodness, and what to speak of a transcendental soul. A classic image that goes along with the concept of compassion is a lotus, somehow. And the image of a lotus, the opposite, is kind of like a symbol for tranquility, peace, and compassion. There are dictionary definitions of compassion. One of them is, compassion has different parts. Compassion is something that you feel. Compassion is something that you do. And there's a cognitive part. We'll see that in a second. The quality of understanding the suffering of others and wanting to do something about it. So a cognitive part and an action part, effective part. A deep awareness and sympathy for another's suffering. So somehow compassion is connected with the circumstances of life. That circumstances of life sometimes have something to do with unwanted circumstance or mishap. I know of a few people that have a few unwanted circumstances in their life. So it's a quality, something that you feel deep within the core of your being. Of course, if that's, some persons are very weak in compassion, but some persons are very strong. And then the choice to act on that which you feel about someone else. The painting on the lower right, that's Chaitanya Mahaprabhu receiving Sanatana Goswami, who desired to be in Lord Chaitanya's association. He took great risks. He gave up a prestigious position to take a very humble position to be in Lord Chaitanya's association. And Lord Chaitanya showed his compassion on him. Some time ago, I saw a TED Talk, and what was on the screen of the TED Talk, it was Everyday Compassion at Google by a Buddhist gentleman, and he was explaining when in his language, same thing that I just said. They're conventional understandings. So there's an affective part, something you feel in relation to compassion. A cognitive part, something you understand about someone else, yourself or someone else, and wanting to do something motivational. So he went through this little exercise that these are 3 standard parts of compassion. And then he went on to explain that he was hired by Google to see that Google could model compassion, which is, not generally what corporate organizations do. But he said it was written about in a book by a gentleman from Good to Great. He's an author of a book, Jim Collins, and said that his explanation and Jim Collins' explanation, as well as the Google's, there are lots of facilities that provide information, like probably too many. And what they wanted to do, that CEOs of Google wanted to do, was to make their organization not just good but great by modeling in their organization the features of compassion. Now, he didn't detail how that's to be done or how they went about it, the strategies that they went, but he was very clear. I'm a Buddhist, and these are principles of Buddhism as well. And there's in corporate world, there's an ambition, get money or get ahead or get some recognition or get something. And if the motivation is just shifted to do something because there's a need and fulfill the need out of a motivation to do something for others, not just the bottom line profit motivation, then they, at Google at least, he was saying, that's what they wanted to do to make themselves great instead of just good. Anyway, he was a good talker. It was a TED Talk, and he was good. And then there's the humility part, which doesn't always go well with the motivation part, because people that are highly motivated are not always very humble. So it's a good combination of how compassion fits in everyday life. There's some quotes. And one of those quotes is from, of all people, Albert Einstein. And it's a familiar one. Our task must be to free ourselves. By widening our circle of compassion to embrace all living creatures and the whole of nature and its beauty. Note that this is maybe a surprise, maybe not a surprise, but broad thinkers think in terms that it's not just the selfish, but beyond selfish. Compassion, embracing all living creatures, the whole of nature and its beauty. Of course, we'd expect something from a person like Dalai Lama. Here's his words. If you want others to be happy, practice compassion. If you want to be happy, practice compassion. Buddhists believe in compassion. Christ spoke about compassion explicitly. Knowledge and ritual without compassion is empty. Both. Religion is not just ritual, and higher knowledge is not just information, but it's with the feeling aspect and wanting to do something. Vyasadeva, great philanthropic souls travel on earth on behalf of the Supreme Personality of Godhead to show compassion to the fallen souls who are averse to the sense of subordination to the Lord. So regardless of science or philosophy or religion, it's found in profound thinkers that move the world. Here's from Bhagavad Gita. Showing compassion to all living entities, you will attain self-realization. Giving assurance of safety to all, you will perceive your own self as well as all the universes in me and myself in you. Now, that's not a Bhagavad Gita quote, that's a Srimad Bhagavatam quote. But it's Lord Kapila Deva speaking. And here's Srila Prabhupada. That is the definition of compassion, one who cannot bear the suffering of another. Great unalloyed devotees of the Lord are compassionate towards the fallen, and therefore they travel all over the world, with the mission of bringing souls back to God and back to home. And that means, one may be inconvenienced or not. Often, the mission of helping people is not for convenience purposes. It's not designed to be convenient. It's designed to be of some lasting and genuine meaning. Oh, the next slides are cute. This is, compassion is not exclusive to humans. There's some nice little photographs. There's a little kitty cat. And there's a little dog that's intimidated by the kitty cat. But after getting used to each other, they cuddle up and make friends and become happy with one another. Or an albino pigeon, a little monkey. I don't know where this photograph came from, but it's a nice one. A giraffe and a squirrel. Or a mother hen with her little chicks and a little, I don't know what it is. It's a puppy, or is it a lamb, or whatever it is. Now these other kind of animals, they're called meerkats. And they have practice to stand on their legs and look around their hind legs. And somehow this cat got mixed in with those guys. So sometimes animals, they're compassionate with one another, and sometimes they're not. And both happen in human society as well as other. There's a celebrated person, because there's compassion in contemporary life. Some nice examples. Some of you know this nice example. Some of you may not know Marshall Rosenberg. If you don't know him, meet Sri Radhika, you'll find out about him. Marshall Rosenberg lived, he's a contemporary of mine during the counterculture era. He lived in Arizona. He had a school. He taught. He had students. He had curriculum. He was celebrated for nonviolent communication. He was a Buddhist by his own conviction, but he put it into practice, and he had a school at NVC, Nonviolent Communication. And what's being shown on the screen here is one of the ways that he would role play. He would explain how violent communication looks and sounds and feels like, and what nonviolent communication looks, sounds, and feels like. So he used these hand puppets to illustrate the jackal is in his right hand, and jackal speak. And he would say what jackal speak is, that violent communication. And then the giraffe was to indicate the nonviolent communication. He explains, because I viewed some of his teachings, the giraffe was chosen because, although the body of a giraffe is large, in proportion to the body of the giraffe, the heart is really big. So the big-hearted giraffe, he would role play, saying the same thing, or responding to people who would speak harshly in a nonviolent manner. And this way he would teach people how to live in the world where people aren't always in the mood of goodness, and how to navigate your way in a manner where speech is nonviolent. His teachings are very similar to Bhagavad Gita's teachings, except in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is at the center, and his Krishna is not at the center. But the principle is quite similar. In Bhagavad Gita chapter 17, text 15, Krishna speaks about this same principle. Speech that's not harsh, it's elevating, and is with sensitivity to the other individual, etc. So aside from nonviolent communication, the whole idea, again, this is a worldwide organization, part of the Peace Corps, dealing with feeling compassion, doing something about it, social activism. Now, how effective, I can't say, but there's a movement, a social activist movement, Peace Corps. And something that Srila Prabhupada would often say is education and training is necessary in order that these better qualities or character features of a human being be brought out. So you need educators and you need education system. And there are ways to help teach a behavior. And it's one of the best ways to teach a behavior is to model the behavior. And when behavior becomes the norm, then it takes on a different term than just a behavior. It becomes a value or a character trait of someone. Cultured people have character. And character doesn't just fall out of the sky. Character is something that people can be trained or be educated or model it and help people understand how that's to be done. And then along with that principle of compassion becomes others that are just natural for a consciousness elevated person. Gratitude, respect, and compassion. Now, our founder Acharya, he was very gifted in bringing persons together from different backgrounds. Here, this is in Germany. I recognize some of the faces. Bhakti Bhushan Swami is right there in the saffron, right in the front. And others and others and others. By association with one who has the quality of compassion, opportunity is provided to develop a similar quality. So the way, my appreciation for how Prabhupada accomplished this was starting from, the core of his very being. He sacrificed and sacrificed and sacrificed and sacrificed. Underwent so much hardship. For what reason? What was the motivator? What was the fuel in his tank that kept him going? Of course, there was an instruction from his spiritual master, which he was carrying to his capacity, but there was a genuine feeling of wanting to do something for the suffering of others. One's heart must be open for this transformation to take place. So that means on the receiving end, sometimes hearts are closed. We've all had that experience. You try to extend and the door's locked. Somehow or another, if the door can open, if the heart can open, then you can touch someone's heart. And if you touch someone's heart, then that's a golden opportunity to bring about transformation from wherever one may have been to the place where it's desirable to go. And to trust with confidence the person who is before you, and whether it's an elder or someone, a peer, but some capable person who is trustworthy, then the hearts can open and you can move in that direction. This is a nice photograph of Bhakti Marg Swami, who is sitting there somewhere, in a park somewhere, and sharing with someone because he's from Toronto. He grew up in Canada, and he's Canadian by his compassionate side. And he's very funny. He's really good at acting. It's one of the services that he does in ISKCON. But he's a very good teacher. It takes time, like was shown here, to help one step by step by step go through what it takes to move from position A to position B to position C to bring about transformation. So Vedic culture has this method of transmitting character from teacher to student. So the relationship, teacher to student relationship, is very important. Here's a nice image of just meant to depict something, a lecture that I heard long ago. I was, in Prabhupada's presence, and he was explaining how God-centeredness works. And he looked around the room and said, supposing we give everybody in the room a pebble, and there's this, and he motioned with his hand, there's a pond of water in the middle, and we ask someone, place your pebble into the water, let's see what happens. And splash, little splash of water comes up, and then concentric circles expand out from that one pebble that's dropped into the body of water. And it's nice. And then someone else put your pebble, and the same thing happens, and it's all very nice. Same thing happens. Except when those concentric circles from pebble 2 and pebble 1 intersect, and then they clash. And then everybody in the room, for the rest of you, put your pebbles into the water. And it's same thing, but it's clash everywhere. No center. And then Prabhupada's explained that the center, if there's an agreement, let us all place our pebbles on the same center. Of course, that's contrived. But if we agree, then the concentric circle behavior or phenomena happens, but then the concentric circles amplify one another. So centeredness, like social activism, this group, that group, another group, they huddle around their interest, but their interest may be in conflict with another group's interest, and so forth. So artificial, trying to bring togetherness without the actual center is quite incomplete. So therefore, the Vedic model is to find out what the actual center is. Now, in this world, there are people have different natures, aside from the different people and different genders and different nations and different colors and different cultural norms. Aside from that, there's, according to the teachings of Bhagavad Gita, there's swabhava. Now, this is getting into Sanskrit terminology for our newer guest. Swa, the prefix swa means one's own. Bhava means nature. So there's different natures, and according to different natures, one is going to behave this way or that way or another way, born of the body type that they have, and thus a certain nature. Here's another image showing the same thing. There's concentric circles with the soul at the center, and then the subtle covering of the soul. This is Bhagavad Gita or Sankhya philosophy. Mind, intelligence, and false ego, the subtle body. And then the gross body, earth, water, fire, air, ether. So the modes of nature act on the coverings. The mode of goodness, or sattva gun, acts on the coverings. The mode of passion, in red, acts on those coverings. The mode of ignorance or darkness acts on those coverings, depending upon the influence of the modes of nature, or the mixture of those modes of nature that one embodied soul has or another embodied soul has. Then you're going to get behaviors. on the subtle plane, what the mind feels or what the body does, and so forth. Behaviors according to the goodness, passion, and ignorance. And compassion is a nice mode. Compassion is a trait of the mode of goodness. And it just happens naturally. The impulse of nature. Just this past 10 days or something like that, there was a group of children. There's an annual children's camp in our farm community in Gitanagari. Several devotees were leading it, and many children were attending it. And one of the favorite parts of the whole event is, of course, prasadam, but the cows. And a number of children, the report from the number of children, the best part is being with the cows. Because being with the cows has an effect. Because cows are in the quality of goodness by their nature. And being around cows helps bring out that quality of goodness. And the quality of goodness brings a feeling of contentment and happiness and peace. Like when you have to slow down, kids like to play and run around and do stuff, and they did a number of those things in the camp. But the best part was not the swimming and the kickball and soccer and all the other running around things. But that's okay. But being with the cows. So the mode of goodness is very compatible with compassion, or compassion arises. It's a trait of the mode of goodness. So how to help people be more compassionate has everything to do with the mode of nature that they're operating with. Here's a nice example that's from the Bhagavatam. The painting is depicting a king whose name was Rantidev. And Rantidev was known to be very charitable and compassionate. He would give in charity. He was the king, but he would regularly give in charity. So one of the things that he decided to do was he would undergo a very difficult fast for some number of days. Forget the number of days, 100 days. How many? 48? Okay. 48. Good. So he fasted for 48 days. He's a king. I can't fast for 48 days. 48 days. And at the end of the 48 days, the next morning, the plan was he'd have a royal feast. So there he was, his cook arranged a royal feast, and he sat down to break this fast. And sure enough, just as he was about to begin his fast, one beggar came, saying, "I'm hungry, can I have something to eat?" He let him right in, and he said, "Sure. You take half of this royal feast, and I'll take the other half." And then another individual came after he was ready to break the fast with the second half, and some man came with some puppies. And "My puppies are very hungry. Can I have something?" He said, "Sure. You take the other half. I still have some water. I can break the fast with water." And then a man came, "I'm thirsty, get some water." So, sure. Because he was generous and very compassionate upon others that have needs. He didn't just feel something, he did something. Later, these individuals revealed they were the devas of Brahma and Lord Shiva and Vishnu, testing him to see the extent of his compassion. And he got A in his report card. So he was genuinely, not circumstantially, very compassionate. As a duty of a king, the duty of a king is to give protection to citizens and to see to their welfare. A classic example of compassion everyone knows in the world, modern world, is Mother Teresa. She gave her life to go to a place where there were many poor people in Calcutta, and she had an orphanage and took care of orphans as if her own. Going back further in time, the compassion of Maharaj Parikshit was demonstrated when, as the painting is showing, the man on the left was reported to the king, Parikshit, that he had a club, pictured at the bottom of the painting, and with the club he was smashing the legs of a bull. And immediately Maharaj Parikshit got on his chariot, got his sword, was ready to chop the guy. You make this doesn't go on in my kingdom. You can't be cruel. And the man said, well, give me I'm at your feet. You're the king. Be merciful. Give me a place to live where I can reside. Don't kill me. So the painting on the far left is showing you can stay where there's religious principles that are being violated. Meat eating, intoxication, gambling. There's no such place in your kingdom. So, the personality of Kali wasn't killed, but to find a place in Parikshit's kingdom where religious principles were being observed, were being violated, wasn't available because he was very powerful and upholding the principles of virtue in his kingdom. Is it possible for someone, the answer to this question is yes. Is it possible that one can feel compassion and compassion can be misplaced? It's possible. Prabhupada gives the example of a drowning man, and the person is drowning and drowning and drowning, and you rescue the coat of the drowning man, but not the drowning man. So that's not really what real compassion is. So the covering of the soul is not who the person really is. Real compassion is directed to who the person really is. So it's fine for one to do something in relation to the covering, but it's incomplete. If the man is still drowning, it's incomplete. When I was a young boy, I lived in upstate New York. And during one season, there was an infestation of locusts. There are these bugs, they're really big, they have wings, and they fly. And there was an infestation, there was zillions of locusts all over the place. And you could hear them. They were chomping at the leaves outside. Like a chorus of... So my mother made a mistake. She sent me into the garage to spray in the garage for keeping the locusts out of the garage. And I saw in the garage our kitty cat. So I sprayed the kitty cat, thinking, protect the kitty cat from locusts. And then in the morning, the kitty cat was the floor of the garage, dead, because the kitty cat licked her fur, and she got the poison that were to kill the locusts, and she died. So good intention isn't good enough. The intention of doing something that's for the well-being of others requires understanding what the well-being of others really is, or who the other really is. Otherwise, compassion can be misplaced. Similar to Arjuna's misplaced compassion, where he was unwilling to do what Krishna wanted because he was attached to the covering. My cousins, my relatives, my thises and that's, and I can't do this. So Krishna discussed Bhagavad Gita so that Arjuna could see beyond the covering and see to the real interest of the soul. And the real interest of the soul is the interest of Krishna. There's a long example, and I'm going to end with this, I think. This is a story from Srimad Bhagavatam. And our newer person in the audience here, there was a king whose name was Bharata. Very, very, very elevated personality. During his rule as a king, he ruled for a long time, and eventually, when he was of age to have sons who could rule the kingdom, he turned the kingdom over to his sons, and he went to the forest to engage in fix his meditation upon the Supreme Person, Narayana. And as he was engaged in his process of austerities and meditation, he was by the side of a river, and he was observing on the other side of the river there was a deer. And the deer was the nervous type of deer, looking this way, that way, drinking water from the river side, looking around, drinking some more. And then all of a sudden, there was a real loud roar of a lion. And the deer became startled. And when the deer became startled, she jumped in the direction of the river. And when she jumped, because of her fear, the pregnant deer had the child that was in her womb was born. And the child fell on the side of the river, on the river bank, and the deer got swept away by the current of the river. And so he, the king, Bharat, saw all this happen. He heard the roar, and he saw the child, little baby deer being born. And so he went across the river and he rescued the little baby deer, because the mother was already downstream, drowned in the river. So he, being compassionate, being a king, looking after the welfare of all the citizens in the kingdom, including little fawns, he took the responsibility of acting like the mother and father of the little baby deer. And so every day, while living in the forest, he was taking care of the deer. There's details, but eventually he became so absorbed in the care of the deer that he began to neglect his devotional activities and became instead immersed in the deer. I just read something from one of our acharyas that gave an indication of why this happened the way that it happened. And it had something to do with Bharat Maharaj in his previous life. And I can't remember exactly what the commentary says, but he did something. I can't remember. He did something that was an offense to a brahmana. I forget what that something was. And because of that offense, it stayed with him throughout his next life. And his next life, because of that past life offense to a brahmana, that was the impetus for him to become neglectful. He consciously, well, it's the painting is showing here, he's doing some rituals of worship, but because of the past offense, he became more, his affinity for the temporary became stronger. And one evening, the deer was missing. So he stopped his practices. He went looking for the deer. And as he was looking for the deer, the night fell. And as the night fell, he went to the edge of a cliff, and he fell off the edge of the cliff, thinking of the deer. And so when he died falling off the cliff, thinking of the deer, oh dear. In his next life, he became a deer, because according to Bhagavad Gita and according to the principles of how things are, whatever the mind is fixed on at the time of death, yam yam vapi smaran bhavam jajat ante kalevaram, for sure one achieves that which is like the mind being fixed at the time of death. So how the mind is fixed at the time of death makes everything. And so this is an example of not exactly misplaced compassion, because a king taking, or anyone taking care of a deer that's helpless, no problem. But to the extent where the spirit is neglected and the matter becomes everything, the covering of the soul becomes everything, then that's misplaced. Yes. So there's more slides, but I'm going to end with that. A principle, the principle of compassion, is a caricature trait of someone in the quality of goodness. In the quality of goodness, one can have good intention, but it can be misplaced if one doesn't understand beyond the covering. So therefore, compassion is, while it's a quality of goodness, it is meant to be combined with transcendence, or spiritual conception, or spiritual way of life. And then it becomes complete. So what's the life like of someone who has a complete conception? So the compassion in contemporary life, that's the starting point of this evening's discussion. We're not so much in the mode of goodness. We're to some degree in the mode of goodness, but not so much. I mean, not as much as it could be, should be, would be. So our strength is cultivate two things simultaneously. The first thing is cultivate an awareness or an awakened state of who we really are on the spiritual plane. That's how Bhagavad Gita begins. Exactly how Krishna begins his talk with Arjuna is lifting him from the bodily conception to a spiritual conception of who he is and who his cousins are, and who everyone is. Move to a spiritual conception, and then secondarily, you can then place the principle of applying the tendency or capacity for compassion behind the spiritual conception. That's what Krishna does with Arjuna. And that's what Srila Prabhupada did with the world. Of course, he taught. He is a teacher, so he taught. He taught compassion. But first and foremost is the awakening of the soul's spiritual conception of self, and that includes removing coverings or diminishing the influence of the coverings, so that we can see more clearly who we really are, who others really are, then act on the platform of the soul in relation to others. And with compassion, that's wanted. A phrase that Prabhupada would use sometimes that I like and use a lot is you put the cart before the horse. So in the cart goes all these nice qualities like compassion, simplicity, cleanliness, truthfulness, etc. The idea is not just to fill up your cart. The idea is to pull the cart. And so what's the horse that pulls the cart? It's the spiritual conception or the cultivation of the spiritual principle of living. So here we are in a nice house. And the designer of the nice house made the living room such that if you don't put a sign up, then people might fall and bonk their heads. You don't step over that little step right there. And then they're going over to go out. So it's a nice house, but you got to be careful even walking around this nice house. And not just be careful walking around the nice house, but then it should be used in a way that's going to promote awakening of spiritual consciousness, because that's the horse. And then what follows behind the horse is the cart. Using the house in such a way in day-to-day life, occupation and eating and social interactions and this is and that, has a spiritual purpose. And the way to mold one's life with spiritual purpose so that the cart has nice qualities and characteristics. Respect, compassion, kindness, etc. Truthfulness, cleanliness, mode of goodness qualities. But at the foreground is the horse, the spiritual purpose of life's mission. And that is a very practical and effective way of awakening compassion in our modern life. So that's one part of the topic of compassion. There's several parts, actually. So let's see if there's some discussion. Shravana Mangala.
Guru Maharaj, regarding the Bharat Maharaj compassion towards the baby deer,
Yeah.
It describes about when he has acted in that situation that led to take one more birth and attachment.
It's not that he gave compassion that caused the rebirth as a deer. That's not the reason. There's nothing wrong with his rescuing the deer.
Then how do we resolve between understanding rescuing and then getting attached to it?
We can understand because he made conscious choice to neglect his spiritual in favor of the material.
Thank you.
Yes.
Maharaj, I don't know if my understanding is wrong for the premise of this question, but in the offenses to the holy name, the 9th offense is to instruct a faithless person on the glories of the holy name. So is that related to misplacing compassion?
It can be. It doesn't. The premise of your question needs some clarity. So now, instructing a faithless person about the glories of the holy name. What does that mean? By definition, what does that mean? For us to say, chant and be happy. That's a slogan, chant and be happy. And we can say it to faithless persons, chant and be happy. It's not a violation of that offense, in the ninth offense in the chanting of the holy name. Because the details and details and details and the glories of the holy name in detail are not being presented to such a person. You can elaborate on what does chant and be happy mean. You can say, people want happiness and they're looking for happiness in the body and in the mind. And that's, to them, that's happiness. But is it really happiness? And you can explore, is it really happiness? So if that's not what real happiness is, then what's real happiness? So you can drill a little bit and it's Sankhya. It's not so much the glories of the holy name. Who are you really? So to know who you really are, that's happiness. Chant and be happy. Relieve yourself of misconceptions of who you are and awaken the conception of who you really are. So that's not an offense to give that to a faithless person, because they can disagree, but they're not directly offending the holy name. They're attached to a material conception and holding on tightly to the material conception. So the glories of the offense means more specifically giving elaborate instructions in the glories of the holy name, scriptural instructions, etc., etc., etc. So we don't do that to faithless people. They're not going to be interested anyways, but we don't do that. Yes.
Hey Krishna Guru Maharaj. Maharaj, as you explained that, in the previous life of Maharaj Bharat, some impression was there. That's why he got that attachment to that deer, right? So how we can understand it?
It's not that he got attachment to the deer. It's that he neglected his spiritual practice. He became so attached, it superseded his free will choice to remain consistently involved in spiritual practice.
So my second part is basically, Bharat Maharaj was performing devotional service, right?
Mm.
I mean, in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says that, in Bhakti Path, I preserve whatever devotee has, right? And I bring whatever he lacks.
Okay.
So why Krishna did not help him to, divert from devotional service?
He made his other choices. He knew what to do. His whole life was doing. And then he made some choices. He wasn't just a nice devotee. That's a nice sadhaka. As you know, he was on the platform of Bhava Bhakti. He was spontaneously engaged in what he was doing. And still he made conscious choices to desist. And the explanation is given. The reason for that conscious choice had to do with an offense in his previous life. And there was a carryover between one life and the next life of an offense in his previous life. That was the thorn in the foot. And he, desisted walking and pulled the thorn. So that was the thorn. It was the offense in his previous life. So, which is to say, offense is very serious business. I don't recall what was the detail of that offense, but whatever it was, it lingered. It was recessive, but it was stored. And then it acted. And then he made choices. Supposing in our lives, we're not perfect in this or in previous lives. So we're likely to have made some mistakes in this or in previous lives. And the residual action remains, especially if it's offense, if it's bad conduct, if it's sin, it's overpowered by bhakti. But offense is something else. Offense is far more serious and hard to remove. So we may stumble and fall. So best to be wary in this life as far as we can to not make offense, like his nice question of offense against the holy name. Make it be clear what an offense is, and be clear. I'm choosing to not do that because it makes life very complicated. Even still, there's free will choices, but he made the wrong free will choice at that point in time. The fructification of some offense came, and he yielded. Made a choice. In favor of attachment to the temporary. So to reciprocate, two things. To reciprocate, the Lord made an arrangement that the deer that he was thinking of at the time of his death, he became. And second, because of his lifelong life of devotion, that stayed with him too. And so that in his next life, even in the body of a deer, he remembered his previous life as a king, as a devotee. So even the body of a deer, he was seeking out holy men in the forest and would listen to their discussions on spiritual topics and take the remnants of food. So he was absolving himself of that previous life's reaction by those spiritual practices. So in the end, he wasn't neglected by Narayana, by the personality of Godhead. He was, taught a lesson and given the means for purification. So it's also for us. It's an unusual dynamic or a series of events, but it illustrates several things. It illustrates how powerful bhakti is. Even in the body of a deer, he was given the privilege of remembering his life of devotion. And it's also instructive that, offense is pernicious. It's very difficult to deal with. So be careful.
Thank you, Guru Maharaj.
Okay.
Hare Krishna. You may have mentioned it before, but you mentioned the mode of goodness qualities to cultivate. How can we go up one more? Because obviously we want to be in the transcendental plane and transcendental mode. So how can we cultivate going from mode of goodness to the transcendental?
To go from mode of goodness to transcendental.
Yeah.
How to?
With you were mentioning like compassion.
Well, the compassion is one of the categories, but we can take respect, or we can take cleanliness, or take any other quality that's in the list of the characteristics of goodness. One can be very fastidious, one can be obsessive about cleanliness. Then one can be very clean for the satisfaction of Krishna. It's the consciousness behind the activity, not just the activity. So the consciousness behind respect. So, cultured people are respectful. Persons in the mode of goods, they're respectful. And then there's transcendental respect. What's the consciousness behind the respect? Not just because, for example, somebody's elderly or something or the other. Consider someone is very learned and wise. And so we're respectful to people that have those traits. But then behind that is there's spirit soul within. And there's Krishna who is pleased. Krishna may smile if I exhibit respect towards this respect-worthy person, respectable person, that Krishna should be pleased. So it's the bhakti principle, that is, that Krishna should be pleased, elevates from goodness to transcendence. So now, the next question. How to awaken and how to strengthen bhakti so that I can go from the mode of goodness to transcendence in all the aspects of what mode of goodness is, into transcendence. So the bhakti principles, that sadhana, we cultivate and practice. We do that which is pleasing to Krishna. We avoid that which is not pleasing to Krishna. And continue to make our free will choices like that. But it's the operative principle is for the pleasure of Krishna. It's love, for the pleasure of the beloved. And as one cultivates and cultivates and cultivates, then the mode of goodness, it moves to transcendence. Or say it the other way. Same thing, just saying it another way. According to Bhagavad Gita, the mode of goodness has some traces of ignorance and passion, the other two modes. So as the other two modes diminish, what's left is pure goodness. And that's transcendence. So you elevate not just by more of this and less of that, but the principle of removal of the lower modes of nature altogether by bhakti. When the light is very strong, the darkness is dispelled. So try, you and I and all of us, cultivate, do acts in goodness for the pleasure of Krishna, because we want to see Krishna smile. And when Krishna smiles, that's my happiness. I mean, like Dalai Lama is saying, if you want happiness, you need to make others happy. If you want to be happy, do acts of compassion. But there's no Krishna in the picture. It's amplifying mode of goodness, but not transcendence. Transcendence is with the bhakti principle. Don't just dial up goodness, dial up bhakti.
Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj. My question was that Bharat Maharaj became a deer in his next life because he thought of a deer at the end of his life. So how come we don't become Krishna if we think of Krishna at the end of our life?
You become Krishna-ized and Krishna-related, but not Krishna. Because I understand the question. It's a good question. It's not that because I think of Krishna, I'll become Krishna. Because I think of Krishna, I'll become in relation to Krishna. Because we're two entities. He's the supreme entity, we're the subordinate entity, eternally. So you don't become the master instead of the servant just by thinking of the master. You become the servant of the master by thinking of the master eternally. Smart question. I like the question. You have something back there? Can you pass the microphone back to her?
So, in this age, like Kali Yuga, like if something happens and like some dramatic, like loss of job or some relationship issue, and everybody says, "Oh, it's Kali Yuga," it's supposed to be like that. Like, can you like elaborate a little bit about like the origin of this saying and like
The
how
origin of which?
like that?
I don't need the preamble. What's the origin of what?
Because like if anything happens to people like in this age, like and everybody's like, "Oh, it's Kali Yuga."
Yeah. I got the preamble. So what's the question?
It's like, how does that Kali Yuga, like how, what is the origin of that saying? Like
The origin of that thing means what?
of the saying, of that saying?
Of the Kali Yuga.
Yeah,
You want to know what's the origin of Kali Yuga?
how it will works, kind of why people keep saying that is like...
Well, that's silly. That's right. Why do people say silly things?
Okay.
It's not that it's supposed to be like that. Let's say, it's summer. So it's warm. Wait a while. It's going to be fall. Wait a while. It's going to be winter. Wait a while. It's going to be spring. So it's just material nature moves in cycles. Kali Yuga is one of those bigger cycles. And it's Kali Yuga. And there are symptoms of summer and fall and winter and spring. There's symptoms of Kali Yuga, and it is what it is. But it's not that therefore I'm doing vicious things because it's the age of Kali, and the age of Kali people do vicious things. I don't have to do vicious things because it's Kali Yuga. It's just the way it is. We just do vicious things in Kali Yuga. You don't have to be like that. It's not the cause and effect. The atmosphere is, the conditions are, the characteristics of this age are what they are, yes. And I don't have to go with the flow. I don't have to become vicious because it's Kali Yuga, or have misfortune after misfortune after misfortune after misfortune because that's just the way it is. My good fortune, so what's good? Ill fortune, good fortune. Then it comes back to definition. We are residents of this country in the age of Kali, and the age of Kali is what it is, and it's going down. Not going up for another long period, 320, whatever number is. It's a long period of time. It's going to keep going down, so that's okay. I don't have to participate in encouraging things to go down or going down with things that go down. I can take shelter. I can choose in some other path, the path of transcendence. I can choose that. You can choose that. We can all choose that. In the circumstance, so if it's cold in Chicago in the winters, it's okay. It's cold in Chicago in the winters. But I don't have to be, so I can deal with the atmosphere of Kali Yuga, but I don't have to buy into being vicious like everything else that gets deteriorated in Kali Yuga. I can be the exception rather than the rule. I can be in a place of shelter of transcendence rather than the victim of the circumstance. Life, for example, life duration gets shorter. I can't change that. As Kali Yuga progresses, life duration gets shorter. In previous ages, life duration was greater. I can't change that. But I can choose how I'm going to live during that shorter duration of life. And behave in a way that's not characteristic of Kali Yuga, but in a way that's characteristic of transcendence, even during that shorter duration of life. The phrase that I use in response to people that say what you said people say, I call the rubber crutch. You're leaning on something that doesn't hold any weight. Oh, it's open. What can you do? It's just Kali Yuga. So I'm going to be nasty because things are nasty in Kali Yuga. So there. It's just part of the program. No. There's some things I can't change. Like, just take this same example again, the duration of life. It is what it is. Now, some people live longer, some people live shorter. Okay? I think that covers it. Oh.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Hello.
I had a quick question. I've heard a statement where I've heard that to be compassionate to others, we have to show compassion to ourselves. So I was just wondering what your thoughts are on that statement in relation.
Well, you know, I'm not sure where you heard that from, because there's a phrase these days, a trendy phrase called self-compassion. So there's some more slides on self-compassion. I didn't go there. There's some people that they speak like that. You know, charity begins at home. So be kind to yourself. Don't beat yourself up. Be kind to yourself. You know, but what does that look like? You know, it's see to your spiritual interests. Make those choices that take care of your spiritual interests, and then naturally it expands out, concentric circles out to those who you are close to, and those who you become close to by making choices that of interest of who you really are. That's my answer to that question.
Thank you, Maharaj.
There is such a thing, but it's not unto another, it's unto oneself. You know, see to your spiritual interest. And then when you do that, then you're much more capable of having a social relationship or interpersonal relationship where you're as concerned about the spiritual well-being of another as about your own. But if you just make spiritual well-being of others everything, and there's neglect of your own spiritual well-being, that's a problem. Something wrong with that picture. Okay. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada Ki. Okay.